right. Well, this is very exciting.
First in-person episode.
First in-person episode. As you can see, we're still under house isolation, social distancing.
We're going overboard, going 8 feet about instead of 6 feet because that's how we roll.
Yeah. This way my spit doesn't travel all the way across the table here.
Exactly. It's all about spit travel.
So it's good. So welcome to Optimistic Realist MD. I said this is very exciting. This is our first in-person recording.
Much less awkward.
Yeah.
Talking to a screen.
Yeah, and then we also have we're right here in my backyard. We even set up some flowers, to make the backdrop a little prettier. Of course, it's not my doing, but I'm going to take credit for it anyways.
Take total credit for it.
Yeah.
They'll never know.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a very exciting topic today.
Yeah, just kind of generalized nutrition, and what many of you probably have seen, just out there in society, there's a lot more overweight people getting these, diseases that are related to diet, and we're just going to kind of see, what's going on out there and discuss why we think it's happening, what we could do to correct it.
And even in, being in practice for 12 years is over the years, you see there are more and more people, and unfortunately younger and younger people are coming in now with chronic metabolic conditions.
What's your youngest?
Now I think we're seeing people starting in their 20s.
Wow.
But the trend is that now is we're starting to see type 2 diabetes as the more dominant diabetes in children.
Yeah.
Type 1 diabetes used to be called juvenile onset because you would only see it in kids.
It's usually genetic based too.
Well, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing that with this epidemic of obesity is that now we're seeing more type 2 diabetes in children. And I think it's pretty much overtaken type 1 diabetes as the dominant form of diabetes in children.
And that's probably because it relates directly to diet and obesity. What's causing it? Yeah.
Right. So it has a lot to do with the lifestyle. And what brought up this topic was I was reading the New England Journal of Medicine. This was from December 2019. And this was a special article on the projected U.S. state-level prevalence of adult obesity and severe obesity. So it's very what's very eye-opening, as well as disturbing to a certain sense. But what it says is that with this model that they've implemented is that they see by 2030. 1 in 2 adults will have obesity. So this is defined as a body mass index or BMI of over 30%. Okay. And 1 in 4 adults, so about 25% of the population will have severe obesity by 2030.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, so this is defined as a body mass index of over 40% in people without chronic conditions, or 30% in people with heart disease or diabetes or any other chronic metabolic conditions. So, yeah, it looks like this number is only going to rise further and further as time goes on. So, well, I guess one good thing is this is job security for me.
That's one way you could look at it. But you and I have even discussed too, just even the fact that they don't teach basic nutrition at medical school. And this is something that could easily be, treated through basic healthy lifestyles.
Yeah, so there are many factors that go into this. There's a lot of historical factors about, this, and I guess we'll go into more detail later, is this whole concept of eating low fat. This is a concept that started in the 40s and sort of propagated, and it's probably reached its peak around like 70s or 80s, that all of a sudden Americans are into this low-fat craze because it was believed, and this was even supported by the American Heart Association, that eating fat or having a diet that's high in fat, regardless whether it's good fat or bad fat, is a diet high in fat will contribute to heart disease or cardiovascular complications. So this is why during those years, through those decades, is that all of a sudden we end up in a culture of uh,
Low fat.
low, yeah, low
Yeah.
fat.
And the
Yeah,
thing with that is when you take fat out of the food, there's no flavor. So they
right,
replace it with sugar to
right,
give it
right,
flavor,
right. So
which
if
is
you
the
take
worst thing
fat
you
out
could
of
do.
right, so if you
Yeah.
take fat out of food, it tastes terrible.
Hmm.
So in order to make up for this, is that they still they have to add in more simple carbohydrates and sugar to make it more flavorful. So
And weird
people,
chemicals.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a artificial flavoring, so people would actually eat it.
Yep.
And I think during this process is that now we're a society where we're eating a very high carbohydrate diet,
I would agree. Yeah.
which may be fueling this whole epidemic of weight gain, obesity, morbid obesity, uh, which ultimately leads to insulin resistance, or what we now call prediabetes,
Hmm.
and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. And the
So
thing, like I've actually read a few articles too about how carbohydrates are addicting. And it's you get a little bit more of it, the brain wants more, and it's kind of like a snowball effect that.
yeah, so it's this whole concept of food addiction,
Yeah.
which is very controversial subject. Very controversial topic, but we know that people are tied to their food,
Mm-hmm.
and when you talk about taking somebody off their diet or switching their diet or switching their lifestyle, this is probably one of the biggest obstacles to overcome.
I feel like, I mean, not to be like extreme, but certain people are so addicted to the lifestyle, the way they eat, that I think they'd rather die and just not make the changes and keep eating the way they do.
Yeah, because it makes them feel happy and safe.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of things that we do in life that we do what we like doing that makes us feel happy is food is one of those things. I think a lot of people have emotional attachments to food.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay, and you could see is we celebrate with food. Um, you know, when people are born, you celebrate with food. Holidays, you celebrate with food. Funerals, you celebrate with food. So you could see how our culture is
Definitely built
very
around it.
right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. Or that culturally we're revolved around food
Yeah.
as a way of, of just celebrating,
Hmm.
being together.
But then that being said, there's also smarter food choices you can make when you do get together and celebrate with food,
Right,
which I
right.
think a lot of people, that's where they're mistaking, or they just don't know. They don't know what's like better for them or good for them and not good for them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But food that are bad for you taste so
it
good.
does, it does.
That's the problem. It tastes so
I
good.
know. I wish it was the opposite.
Yeah. So going back to this obesity epidemic, so it's sort of this, uh, the shift in macronutrients over time due to, I don't want to call it shady science, but it's
A lot of it's
probably
marketing too.
well, what's more theoretical, and
Yeah.
there really wasn't any large randomized studies to really look at this. It was just something that was observed, published, and then all of a sudden was adopted by society.
Yeah.
So it's the shift of increasing this carbohydrates, and especially simple carbohydrates and sugar
Yeah.
in diet. And the other thing too is, with the change in the food industry, you know, um, there have been a lot of changes in terms of artificial flavoring, making food that's not as healthy for you, food that's more processed, tastes better
And
and
lasts longer.
lasts
Yeah.
longer and more addictive.
Yep.
So
And more convenient. So
right,
food
right,
convenience. I mean, we have more access to food now than we ever have. And I mean, just any typical fast food restaurant, it's fast food, but it's
right,
not healthy.
right.
So,
And every food item that's served for you, there's probably a couple hundred different iterations, and they choose the one that either tastes the best or is the most addicting.
and cheapest.
Right, right, right. And they try to make it. Of course, it's and that's the other thing is that is cheap food is usually very highly caloric.
Yep. Yep.
When you go to a fast food restaurant and you get the crispy fried chicken sandwich, two for $4.
Mm-hmm.
It tastes so good, but again, it's highly caloric, it's highly processed.
Yep.
Um, it does lead to different metabolic changes that would change that would increase your risk for weight gain and
Mm-hmm.
obesity.
Yep.
And I always tell people it's not a coincidence that food that is good for you is not addictive. If you think about
It's
it,
true.
if you think about it, I mean, nobody feels threatened when you threaten to take away their broccoli.
Yeah. Well, as I've spoken with you, like I've been a very clean eater for most of my life, and like I like a lot of my food, and I think
Right.
it tastes good.
Right.
So I still believe that it can actually become part of your lifestyle. That if you eat this food enough, you kind of acquire a taste for it, and then you start to like it, like you would cheap bad food. And even
Well,
now, when I eat cheap bad food, it makes me feel awful afterwards. So it's
it's interesting, this whole idea of sort of cleaning your palate.
mm-hmm.
Starting to eat things that are more natural, that are better for you, and I yeah, and I encourage everybody to take this challenge. Is that to for a period of a month, just eat non-processed food.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, get the vegetables, get the fruits, get the meat. Cook it yourself, make it yourself. Try to avoid and what you'll find is that after a month, your taste bud changes.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So you actually start tasting food more.
Mm-hmm.
Like a peach will taste more than a peach.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I think we replace taste buds like at what 3 or 4 days about.
right,
So over time, it's going to adapt to different stimulus and like that you're
right,
eating, and that's going to make you start to enjoy food. I mean, there's got to be a food that you probably like now that you hated as a kid,
yeah.
right? Like I hated broccoli as a kid, and now I love it.
Well, I eat everything now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I used to hate Brussels sprouts. I can't stand Brussels sprouts.
I
But now I eat them. You learn how to cook it, and now
Yeah,
you taste all the different nuances. If not for anything, I mean, look at alcohol, for example. I remember having my first taste of beer when I was. I don't remember. I was probably like 4 or 5, and
I hated it. I remember.
yeah,
Yeah,
I just happened to grab my dad's beer and I tasted it and hated it.
yeah.
And I think that causes such trauma that I never tried it again till college. So
Ugh.
yeah, but then your taste adapts. But if you start eating more naturally, is that if you try, let's say you eat naturally for 30 days and then you try to go back to more processed food
Mm-hmm.
or food with added sugar or corn syrup, is sometimes the taste gets a little bit more overwhelming.
Yeah, like with sweets now. I mean, I'm not really a big
Yeah,
sweet guy. Like chocolate is like my biggest thing, but
right,
I can't have stuff that's super sweet because it's like overstimulating
right,
almost, And there'll be times where if I have too much, like on a holiday or something, I actually get like sores on my tongue
right.
because it's probably just an overstimulated taste bud or something
Yeah,
because it's not
yeah, and
used to it.
it almost tastes a little bit too much.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like overpowering.
hmm There's
Um,
actually a program called the Whole 30. That's that one book, other book I told you about,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. You mentioned it.
so it's like an elimination diet for 30, for about 30 days,
Hmm.
and you eliminate any potential trigger like allergen, like no gluten, everything's freshly cooked, like no added sugar for
Hmm.
a whole month, and then what you do is you start slowly reintroducing certain things in and seeing how it makes you feel. So let's say you start eating a little more bread, but it doesn't bother you. Okay, maybe gluten doesn't bother you, but then you
Right,
introduce dairy and that
right.
messes your stomach up. All right, so maybe you should cut back on dairy. So
Yeah,
that's an excellent thing that I think everyone should do.
yeah, and it's a good strategy. I think this whole idea with elimination diets, and I'm pretty sure if you go on the internet, there's they call the ultimate elimination diet, where you
hmm
just eat nothing but meat. It's called a carnivore diet. That's all you eat is animal meat and organ meat.
Is bacon included?
bacon is included.
Nice. I would do it then. I would totally do it.
But they encourage just eating meat because that's the ultimate elimination diet.
Yeah.
Because you're just eating pure protein and fat.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nothing
then
added.
over time, over time is that you start reintroducing food items back into your diet to slowly see how it affects you.
Yeah, it sounds just like the Whole30 almost.
Right,
A little more
right, right.
extreme, but
Yeah, so it's the same idea with Whole30.
Yeah.
Is eliminating it and then slowly adding it back. And there's a lot of this whole concept of food allergy now, which I don't know if it's really allergy or not. I think it's just certain foods your body does better, certain foods it doesn't.
like I just realized I can't have garlic in the quantity I had last night.
Oh yeah, garlic. I don't know. You should check to make sure you don't have any of those vampire genes.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you go out and suck blood at
Yeah.
night. But with this whole food allergy is you can't expect everybody to eat and digest food the same way.
No, and that's why.
And I think if you look at different cultures, how you were brought up, the type of food that you're used to eating, there's certain things your body processes better, and there's certain things that your body doesn't process at all, and may actually be deleterious to your to your well-being.
That's why you really can't approach diet like a one-size-fits-all model.
Right.
We were even talking about that with intermittent fasting, and
Right.
it works for some people, and some people it doesn't work for. They
Right.
need to
Yeah.
eat when they get up.
Yeah, and this is why the Whole30, the whole concept of Whole30 is to really reduce your diet down to the basics. Okay, so reducing it down to what you would have eaten if you were still a hunter-gatherer.
Yep.
Okay, so this includes, your meat, your seafood, fish, your vegetables,
Nuts and
fruits.
seeds.
Yeah, nuts and seeds.
Yep.
So these are things you can find out in the wild
Yeah.
that you can eat in its raw form.
That's not in a package.
Right, that's not in a package. And this is supposedly this is what the human body was designed to eat. And then you just start introducing other things back into your system. Food items that you have to cook.
Yeah.
So for example, legumes. You can't really eat legumes
Raw.
at least a lot of them. You don't eat it in its natural state.
Minus peanuts.
Peanuts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right.
Or even peanuts yet. I don't think you really eat raw peanuts, right? Most of them are
No,
roasted.
no. I think peanuts you have to roast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Nuts you can eat raw.
yeah.
But the other thing too is the like wheat products. Okay, nobody ever goes out to the field and just pick a stalk of wheat and chew on it.
Yeah. Well, that was my whole biggest thing too. With like, if you even think about what bread and wheat products are made of, it's just a seed, right? And then that seed is potentially, well, it's not potentially, it is a plant embryo that wants to grow into another plant. So it doesn't want to be eaten.
Right.
So it's going to have chemicals on the outside seed coat that's going to protect it from being digested, essentially,
Right.
But then you look at something like an apple, it tastes sweet,
Right.
it wants to be eaten. And you think about like a deer eating an apple out in the wild,
Right.
it eats the whole thing, doesn't digest the seeds, poops the seeds out.
Right.
The poop
And it
is an
grows
excellent
somewhere
fertilizer and it grows in the tree.
Right.
So it's even the way things taste. Like
Yeah. And
our bodies know if something doesn't taste right, we probably shouldn't be eating it.
Right, and I was talking to a nutritionist too. Is that the way she sees it is that if you're only eating a diet that's high in carb items, okay, so your bread, your pasta, your noodles, your baked goods, okay, these are all basically you're replacing your whole nutrition with seeds, because this is what wheat is. Wheat is just seed that is ground up into a flour, and then you change that flour into other food items.
Yeah, by adding extra stuff to make it palatable.
Right.
Extra ingredients usually.
Right. So I think it's not that. I don't think wheat is. Well, I think too much wheat is not good for you, but I don't think naturally it's an evil product.
Yeah.
But you still have to have a more balanced diet.
Exactly.
Because otherwise you're just going to replace your whole diet with these, small number of seeds.
Yeah.
And and this also brings up a interesting topic. Okay, I ran to this paper, and this is one of the questions we haven't always have is a calorie a calorie? I don't think I sent this to you.
I don't think so, but I'm pretty familiar with it. So
No, because
yeah.
I have to one up on you.
You don't have to try that hard there. It's a pretty easy feat.
Can't give you everything. It's like have to one up on you here, but this whole concept is a calorie a calorie is the food item you eat. Let's say you eat 300 calories of corn. Is that equivalent to eating 300 calories of broccoli or even nuts
Or Skittles.
or Skittles? Okay, yeah. So it turns out that a calorie is not a calorie because it all has to do with how your body processes.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that if you look at protein, okay, so protein contains 5.65 calories per gram, okay, as opposed to carbohydrates, which contains 4.1 calories per gram.
That's interesting because any textbook that I've read would say that carbs and protein are both 4. So proteins are actually 5 per gram.
That's pretty close.
Yeah.
As compared to fat is 9.4
Yeah.
calories per gram.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at it, it's like, wow, if I eat a lot of fat, I'm going to gain a lot of weight. Well, then you have to look at what they call the coefficient of availability.
Okay.
Okay, what percentage of that calorie is available to you when you eat this item?
And that you actually absorb.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you look at carbohydrates, its coefficient of availability is 97%.
Mostly all of it. Yeah.
So basically, you're absorbing almost all of it. Okay, as opposed to fat, which is 95%, and then protein is actually 92%.
Oh wow.
Okay, so interesting enough is that if you look at a 2,000 calorie diet, okay, so if you look at a 2,000 calorie diet, what that means is in proteins you would absorb about. So this is just simplifying. Just as a disclaimer, I don't want to piss off all the nutritionists and everybody out there, but I don't have a nutrition degree. But I'm only basing this off the paper.
Yeah.
So I don't want every.
So get mad at the paper, not at him. All right.
So if you look at let's say you eat 2,000 calories of protein, well, you're absorbing about 1,840 of that.
Okay.
Okay, which means you lose 160 calories. Okay, because you can't process it, or the energy that takes to process it is higher.
Yeah.
Okay, as opposed to fat, you would absorb 1,900, and carbohydrates you would absorb 1,940, so 1,940 calories.
It's only 60 calories you're not absorbing.
Right. So if you look at it, is if you eat 2,000 calories of carbohydrates versus proteins, is you're absorbing effectively 100 calories less in protein.
That adds up.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, this is a very simplified view of it because it doesn't take into account the whole digestion process. And the other thing that goes into this too, in terms of calorie versus calorie, is you have to look at the fiber content.
Yep.
Okay, so fiber, how I explain this to my patient is that fiber either decreases or slows down the absorption of sugar.
And it helps you poop.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and it's good for digestion, and your gut flora loves it. Yeah, so if we're looking at eating fiber, for example, okay, so if you eat things that are very high in fiber content, well, you're not absorbing the full calories. Okay, I think both of us watched that documentary, Fed Up.
Yep.
Yep. So it has a beautiful demonstration. Is that if you eat a piece of candy, is that it goes right into the stomach, it's broken down, goes right into the intestine, and basically the whole thing gets absorbed as sugar. As opposed to if you eat an almond,
Or a handful of nuts, yeah.
right, because of the higher protein, fat, and fiber content, is that then it has to go into your small intestine, it gets absorbed, it gets processed through your digestive tract, and then you actually only absorb a certain percentage.
And it's a slower release of energy into the body as
Right.
well. So it's almost like, I always compared it to like getting a a vaccine or a flu shot to
Mhm.
like an IV drip. So when you eat something that has to be like, processed and
Right.
has a lot of fiber and fats broken down slowly, that's a whole concept too. With like whole grain, they say that it doesn't spike blood sugar as much as white bread because it's got the fiber in it that
Right.
kind of just drips sugar into your bloodstream so your body can use it when it's not just a one-shot thing where your body can't use it
Yeah.
that quickly and just stores it as fat.
Yeah, and that brings up the whole concept of glycemic index.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we probably hear that. It's been thrown around in the internet a lot. This whole idea of glycemic index is how much a food item will spike up your blood sugar.
Mhm.
Okay, so for example, white bread is much higher. White bread is actually along the same line as eating pure sugar.
Yeah, I've read that too. It's just like taking
Right.
table sugar
Right,
and just
and
spooning it
then
in.
right as opposed to, like a piece of steak, which almost has an extremely low, almost zero glycemic index.
Yep.
Because the pure protein is not going to spike your blood sugar as much. Um, so yeah, so this just going back to the concept is a calorie is not equal calorie.
Mhm.
Is that if you eat something that has a higher unsaturated fat content, protein content, more fiber.
Yeah.
Okay, is that you're it's not equivalent to, let's say, eating 3 slices of Wonder Bread, or eating a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Okay, because one, you're not absorbing quite as much of it. Number two is it has all the nutrients that your body needs to build itself.
Yep.
The
And naturally.
Right, the
Yeah.
fiber that your gut needs, your gut flora needs, and number three is you're not going to absorb the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
And absorb it slowly too. That's
right,
another
and you
key thing,
absorb it
too.
slowly.
Yeah.
So effectively, you're actually eating, and this is not even going into the whole process of triggering insulin function, storing fat. That's just I think that's just a talk to all of it on its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so in the past, I would say in this past 2 years, two things that have really came up was this and gained more popularity is this concept of ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Okay.
It's actually been around for a really long time. I remember I tried it first, intermittent fasting, I want to say 11 years ago when
Mm-hmm.
I first started CrossFitting and the whole paleo diet was popular. And that was, something that came out. So, let me try it. But the past 2 years, it's been becoming more and more popular. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, I think intermittent fasting goes back even further.
Oh, yeah.
It was around when the first humans were on Earth,
Well, I mean, it's still,
or our first humanoid.
and I always thought, yeah, it's true. It's just because we didn't have food available all the time, right? We had
Right.
to like hunt and gather, and even a lot of religions, they still practice fasting.
Right.
And this is from like ancient times. So it's got to be something,
Yeah, because as a hunting gathering society, is you have to be able to eat and store energy when you can, and if you don't, you have to be able to expend off of your body's energy. But also even ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diet's been around since the 1920s.
Yeah.
This concept was first introduced as a treatment for epilepsy.
Really?
Yeah, so somehow by keeping somebody on a high fat, high protein, low carbohydrate diet, is that it decreased the excitation of the neurons.
So with the ketones, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So with the ketones, but also changes the metabolism of neurons, so that there's an enhancement of the inhibitory signals, so it doesn't fire quite as often, and that's what epilepsy is.
Yeah.
Epilepsy is a abnormal firing of certain neurons.
I think one of these articles was saying something about multiple sclerosis too.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
ALS maybe?
for
Yeah.
inflammation, and
Yeah.
we'll touch on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so these concepts have been around for a long time, but I think it's just and over the years there's been different iterations of ketogenic diet, Atkins diet.
Yeah.
A lot of people would argue that it's maybe different from ketogenic diet, but basically similar
I
concept.
think it's the same thing. I don't think about Atkins as I think there was more like products made for it, whereas
Right.
the keto diet, I don't really think there's, well, no, there's products that they
No,
advertise as keto. So
Yeah, no. If there's a diet, there's a product.
Yeah, it's true. It's all about money. No one cares about people's health. It's just money.
If there's a market, somebody's gonna come up with something to market.
Yep.
That's what I figure. So, um, except with intermittent fasting, I don't think
I don't
there's
think you really market that.
I don't think there's anything out there that is marketable, because basically what we're telling people is not to eat.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
what we
and
got to
it's
do. We
like,
got to find something that we can market it. Then
yeah. I mean,
we're set.
I don't think anybody will pay you money
To not to eat.
for not to eat.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Imagine, like, you.
yeah. No, it's true. It's a good point.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
imagine paying for somebody to tell you not to eat. Well,
A little counterproductive.
well. I mean, there are people who are very successful with that. They have metabolic centers, center around it.
Well, like you said too, food it's an emotional part of people's lives. So
Right.
if it's an addiction, it's just like any addiction, you
Right.
know. So they may even like a support group that could help them start intermittent fasting.
Right.
It could always be something.
Yeah, so if we look at the macronutrient contents of these diets, so this article compares what we universally consider as probably one of the healthiest diet is the Mediterranean diet.
Actually, there was something funny I read about this. It was saying a lot of people failed about it because they just add olive oil to their diet and don't change anything else. And they're like, "Oh, I'm Mediterranean," but they're still eating like McDonald's with
So-
olive oil.
Well, because what's happening is that they're eating the same crap,
Yeah,
and they're not cutting out down the calories, and they just add olive oil to their regimen.
yeah,
And then so now they have all the, let's say if you're eating 2,200 calories and you don't reduce that, and then you add more oil to it, and now you're eating a 2,500 calorie diet, and of course you're going to gain weight.
exactly.
You're not going to get healthier.
And the whole concept of Mediterranean is it pretty much when you read about it, and this article says you're replacing carbohydrates with healthier fats and healthier proteins.
Right, yeah. So if you look at their breakdown, is that so what makes up a Mediterranean diet is about 30 to 45% of unsaturated fats, 20% from protein, and about 35 to 50% coming from carbohydrates. But again, to emphasize, is it's not just any simple carbohydrates.
Yeah.
This is more of your whole grain,
Less processed.
higher fiber, less processed carbohydrates. But carbohydrates also include, your legumes, your vegetables do contain carbohydrates.
Potatoes, yeah,
but,
tubers.
right. Fruits also consider a carbohydrate. So Mediterranean diet, if you look at it, is I think widely considered in medicine as probably the healthiest diet, because one, there's a lot of studies done through it. Number two is that it does consistently show a decrease in cardiovascular complications.
And it's also got it's not an elimination diet. You still got all the nutrients. You're not cutting out carbohydrates for, say, like things like the keto diet would.
Right. Yeah, and then if we compare this to a ketogenic diet, or what we call a very low carbohydrate diet, okay, so what we're looking at is now you're cutting down your carbohydrate content, okay, depending on the level you want to cut it down to either less than 25% or less than 10% of your daily intake. So a lot of these plans have you eat anywhere from 30 to 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. So if you think about how little that is, one slice of Wonder Bread is roughly about 15 grams.
Yeah.
So basically you're eating about 3 slices of bread per day.
Yeah.
Okay, which just tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, if
that
you look at 15 grams of pasta is about half a cup of pasta.
Yeah, but who eats half a cup of pasta?
So I have a cup of pasta. So
Yeah.
so one of the things we use for diabetes teaching is we show them the palm method. Okay, the palm method right there. Okay, so the palm method is anything that fits within your palm, you would roughly consider about 15 grams.
Gotcha.
Okay, so this will be 15 grams of pasta, 15 grams of bread, 15 grams of rice. Anything and it means like a flat amount.
Yeah.
It's not like
Not like a ball. Yeah.
like a piled up on
Yeah.
your hands. That doesn't count. But it's like flat. This would be about roughly 15 grams.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, when's the last time you sat down and ate this much pasta?
Never.
15 grams of
You
pasta.
get this huge bowl that's probably like
Yeah.
60 grams of
Yeah.
pasta.
So most people eat, in one sitting would eat, at least a quarter to a third of a pound of pasta.
Yeah.
Okay, which is
Like 4 or 5 servings.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
4 or 5 servings of what would be recommended.
Well, I think that's what a lot of people get confused about too. Is they'll look at a. I mean, I don't even want to say, like, some people don't know how to read a nutritional label, but they'll look at a food label and be like, oh, it's low in calories, but they don't look at the serving size. So, like 4 Oreo cookies may be like, 100 calories, but like then they eat the whole row and they're like, oh, it's only 100 calories. But no, that was 5 servings. You see? It's like,
Yeah, and the way your body processes it too.
yeah.
Okay, is again, a calorie is not equal to a calorie.
Yeah.
Depending on what you eat. And and the last thing here is intermittent fasting, or it has different names, different protocols.
All kind of same concept.
Right,
Yeah.
but they're the same concept.
Yeah.
Basically, it's allowing your body to fast for a longer period of time, so
Yep.
your body can go into a more ketotic state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so instead of forcing your body to continuously store energy, you're going for a longer time without eating, so you can start start expending some of that energy that you have stored.
Yep.
Okay, so this comes in all different protocols. I think if you look on the internet, like, everybody has their protocol.
Yeah.
1 day on, 1 day off.
I think the most popular one is the 8-hour eating window.
Right. Yeah.
16-hour
Right.
fast.
So the 8-hour eating window or the 6-hour eating window, it's called restricted time eating, or it's restricted time feeding,
Mm-hmm.
because you're restricting your eating period to a 6 to 8 hour period. So which means you fast most of the day, and then you eat within that 6 to 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So basically all of these in the same endpoint is that you're forcing more release of fat into your system.
Yep.
And then you're allowing your body to process this fat into ketones,
Mhm.
which then can be utilized as energy.
Yeah.
Okay. So ketones are interesting. I think in endocrinology, we were always taught to think of ketones as the enemy.
Yeah, because of ketoacidosis.
Right,
Yeah.
because of diabetic ketoacidosis, which is one of the few emergencies that we actually have to treat. So ketoacidosis happens when your body doesn't have enough insulin, so you start building up on these ketones or keto acids. And without insulin, is that your body, without a certain amount of insulin, is that your body cannot process ketones. So then it builds up, and then then your blood becomes acidic.
Yeah, pretty much.
So therefore the acidosis part, and then once it gets to a certain level, it can be fatal.
Yeah,
it
it
can
shuts
be
down the
lethal.
brain. Yeah.
Right. It can shut down the body by
Mhm.
being in that acidotic phase. But this can happen in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes patients.
More common in type 1, though, right?
More common in
Yeah.
type 1, because in type 1, they have destruction of islet cells, so they don't produce any insulin.
Yeah.
But I think we were always taught that ketones are a bad thing. That's why when we talk about ketosis, it's like, a lot of people shy away from it.
Well,
It's
that
like,
was when I first started hearing about it, and like I started doing the low carb diet and like intermittent fasting, and like there were points where you could actually like smell the ketones on your body sometimes,
Right.
But I remember, because when I took anatomy and physiology in college, I learned about how ketones are really bad, and then I start reading about this stuff and saying they're good, and like the brain actually performs better using that as a fuel than it does glucose. I was like,
Right.
huh. So yeah, it's I guess because they finally did the more research on it that they realized that. And then this article was saying that it actually controls gene expression, which I thought was amazing because
and that's something we'll touch on too,
Yeah.
is that there are a lot of physiologic changes that happen in your body by inducing ketosis
Mhm.
or even just by fasting.
Yeah.
That you induce biologic changes that makes your body more resistant to damage.
which is awesome. Even now with the whole COVID, they were saying on the news that how it improves your immune system. So people started doing it just for that reason, but
Right.
it actually does boost your immune system.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, we went to the whole macronutrients.
Yeah.
So the typical American diet. So I looked this up. I looked this up on Dr. Google
Nice. He knows everything.
because Dr. Google knows everything. So the typical American diet is a 2,200 kilocal per day diet. So basically 2,200 calories.
Sounds about right.
Okay. So 2,200 calories, I guess it's good for somebody who's active.
Yeah. I
Okay.
probably have a little more than that. I never really added it up, but
Yeah. But it also depends on your age too.
yeah.
I mean,
And
if you're
height,
right.
activity.
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
you're 20 years old and you're eating 2,200 calories,
Oh, I was eating like
That-
8,000 calories.
Right.
Okay.
right, that actually could be too low, because your metabolism's higher as opposed to somebody who's in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Eating a 2,200 calorie diet may be too much.
Yeah.
Depending on again their activity level, but their macronutrient makeup, okay, 15% protein,
It's pretty low.
right, 35% fat. And we don't even know if this is good fat or bad fat.
Yeah.
Okay, but 50% carbohydrates.
That's a lot.
Yeah, 50. And if you imagine 50% of what you eat in a day is considered carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Okay, so this just goes to show again is that over the last few decades we have shifted to a very carbohydrate heavy diet.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's cheap to make those products too, and they taste good.
Well, carbs are cheap.
Yeah, very cheap.
I mean, I mean, if you go to a restaurant, if you go to an Italian restaurant, for them to serve you a quarter pound of pasta versus a half a pound of pasta, I mean, we're talking about a few cents.
Yep.
Okay, but because of the size difference in the plate, is that they can charge you,
Double.
yeah, they can charge you double or
Yeah.
like $5 to $10 more
Mhm.
because now you have a bigger plate.
Yep.
So something that cost them 50 cents more to make, instead of charging you instead of charging you $10, they can charge you $20.
It's all about money.
So this is why when you look at portion sizes, because you'll never see the vegetable portion sizes being
Never.
doubled.
No, never.
Okay, because vegetables are relatively expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you
Which is sad. Like we were saying before, if you go to the supermarket and buy healthy food, you're going to be spending more money.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
But the good thing with a lot of these dietary changes is that we're starting to see more studies that are coming out in these past few years looking at the real benefits of it.
Yeah.
Okay, and and one thing I want to touch this, and this is dear to my heart, is this whole concept of intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I've been doing this now for about 9 months.
Yeah, you got me on the bandwagon again about,
Yeah.
I think I started a little more than a month ago, I think, right?
Right.
Was it?
Yeah, so for me, I've been doing a 16-hour fast. So
Same. I've been like 16, 17.
Yeah, so I do a 16-hour overnight fast. So I usually stop eating at 8 o'clock at night. I don't start eating till 12 p.m. the next day. And I eat within an 8-hour window.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be the 8-hour restricted time feeding schedule. And I started this back in last summer, 2019, because at that time I was having, like everybody else, I was gaining weight. I was tired. I was having joint pains.
Yeah, your ankles are getting
Oh yeah,
swollen.
I was having these horrendous joint pains in my leg,
Yeah.
and I started reading into research because I didn't want to keep taking prednisone or anti-inflammatories, knowing what type of long-term damage it could cause the body. So then I started researching into nutrition, and I came upon intermittent fasting, and I saw one of the effects of intermittent fasting is it does have a very strong anti-inflammatory effect.
Huge.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
let's try it.
You know what's funny that you just said that is I've had shoulder issues my whole life, but my shoulders have never felt better than they did currently right now. And like I said, because of this lockdown, I'm probably working out too much because I have the time, and I would be dying by now. And I'll get muscle soreness, but the joint pain is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because with intermittent fasting, and this, it doesn't matter if you're doing the restricted time feeding, the 1 day on, 1 day off, 2 days a week. Yeah.
Some people are extreme. They'll go like a week.
Oh, that's
Like,
too much. I can't
yeah,
go for a week
I would.
without eating.
Yeah, I would die.
I don't have a love-hate relationship with food, but I think after a week
Get bored,
I'll get get bored of not eating.
or I would just be starving.
But but if you look at any type of fasting, is that what they found is that it improves glucose regulation,
Mm-hmm.
increases stress resistance, and suppresses inflammation. And and what's interesting for me reading this article, so this is a review article from New England Journal of Medicine, again from December 2019, is that so during fasting, what it says here is that cells activate pathways that enhance intrinsic defenses against oxidative and metabolic stress, and those that remove or repair damaged molecules.
And DNA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so somehow, just with fasting alone, is that it has these effects that it helps with, um, not only decrease inflammation, okay, but it also makes your cells more resilient to damage
Mm-hmm.
because it improves its ability to heal itself
Yeah. Yeah.
or to avoid these metabolic damages.
So let me ask you a question. I was actually thinking about this as I read this article, just with autoimmune diseases. Do you think that this could be a possible way to treat an autoimmune disease? Or I feel like you could definitely
Well,
prevent it.
yeah, well, I think it's at the end of this review article, they did mention that they're doing ongoing studies looking at, using it in terms of helping with inflammatory conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and interesting enough, it also shows that they're doing this in to help with improved cognitive function.
I was just going to read that. Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, so it doesn't seem to just help with resilience, okay, but somehow some resilience and improvement in cognitive function
Yeah. Well,
in
they
your
came straight
neurons
out and
too.
said that it actually extends your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to a certain extent, and they, if you look at these, I'm trying to find that article and I couldn't find it, but uh, what defines cellular aging is these end caps on your DNA. These are called telomeres,
Telomeres. Yeah.
right? So as your cell replicates, these telomeres get shorter and shorter, and as shorter it gets, it means that you're aging.
Mm-hmm. I always, when I talk to my students about them, I compare it to the aglets at the end of the shoelace.
Right.
So once that starts to wear away, the shoelace starts to rip apart. And
Right.
oh,
Right. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So as the telomere shortens, that means you're sort of reaching the end, of your cell life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that fasting and sometimes even with ketogenic diets it somehow looks like it can prolong the shortening of those telomeres. So again, could this possibly be a sign that it can help with aging,
Yeah.
or at least help you age? Um, it, what we
Age
call
more gracefully.
Yeah, what we call graceful aging.
Yeah.
So
Less wrinkles.
or metabolic aging. It slows your
Yeah.
metabolic
Yeah.
aging, but allows you better health at an older
Older age. Yeah.
chronological
Yeah.
age. Okay. Yeah, and all of these effects seems to be independent of the weight loss effect.
Yeah. Or what they're eating actually too, which I found was
Right.
pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So somehow it has to just do with the
Timing.
the fasting itself.
And the
you know,
ketones.
and sometimes I wonder as a society, are we just eating ourselves to death?
Well, I remember when I first got really into like working out and nutrition, like, oh, you need to eat every 2 to 3 hours because your metabolism starts to slow. And now you're reading things like this, was a complete opposite. And I mean, that's what people were pushing for, and
Right.
that's what they thought was true. And like, 3 square meals a day, 2 snacks, 5 times a day.
Yeah, and that was another question I had to consult with Dr. Google.
What?
This whole concept of 3 times per day eating.
Yeah.
Okay, so because again, going back historically, if you look at a hunting gathering society, is you eat when you can,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can't find food, you have to be able to fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at a lot of ancient civilizations, is they don't eat 3 meals a day.
Nope.
I was reading that Romans only eat 1 meal a day. And usually it's a midday.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually around what we'll now consider as lunchtime.
Yeah.
Is when they'll eat their biggest meal, and then that was it. That was their main meal.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on their type of labor, maybe they would snack, earlier or later, but they would only eat 1 meal. Um, if you look at Native American tribes, again, nobody eats 3 meals a day. They
Mm-hmm.
they eat when they need to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a novel concept. Actually, eating when you're actually hungry.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of something personally because when I was at work, I would just make the same thing for lunch every single day
Right.
because I literally saw lunch as just fuel to get in to give me energy.
Right.
Because I don't want to have to think about what I needed to eat and like get creative. So it allowed me to actually focus more on my job than what I'm having for lunch.
Right.
So, and then
Yeah.
people were like, "Oh, it's so boring." I was like, "Well, maybe boring for you, but it works for me." So it's,
Yeah. So actually, this whole concept of eating 3 meals a day came from the English settlers. And the concept was brought over from wherever they immigrated from. And in this
Interesting.
case, from England.
yeah,
And it was really the aristocrats who actually had the time and the money
to eat 3 meals a
to
day.
eat 3 meals a day.
It's interesting. Well, what you'll learn when you read that book, where the food pyramid came,
Yeah.
it was actually the food pyramid was based on. I don't know if don't quote me on this. It's in the book. It's been a couple of years since I've read it, but I don't know if it was a Dutch or sweet or something. But it was designed after a peasant's diet. So
Right.
all the really cheap but caloric dense foods were put at the bottom. So if they were poor, they were able to get their calories in cheaply. And if
Right.
you look at the food pyramid, what's on the bottom? All carbohydrates.
Right.
So
But this made sense back then because the peasants did most of the physical labor and the farming.
exactly.
Okay, there's the same thing as if you look at Chinese culture. If you look at the people who cultivate rice, their diet is very high in carbohydrates because 60-70% of their diet will consist of rice,
Yeah.
and then everything else is just to flavor the rice.
Mhm.
That's sort of traditional Chinese eating, and this makes sense because if you're toiling in the fields for 8 to 10 hours or even up 12 hours a day,
Spending tons of energy.
depending on the season, you're expending so much energy that you can actually intake all those carbs and be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to now is we eat the same amount of carbs, but most of our jobs are sedentary.
And that's, I think, another big thing that's killing us as a nation is that we've become much more sedentary individuals.
Right, because we don't
We move
move
less.
around.
Yeah.
Okay, because our work is more sedentary. Same in my work. Most of the day I'm just either standing around or sitting around, but I'm not actively doing any type of labor-intensive work. So I think as a industrialized society, is jobs become more sedentary.
Yep.
So if you look at now at the countries that have the highest growing numbers of diabetes, okay, it's actually India and China,
Really?
because these countries have become industrialized and they're adopting more of a Western diet, and on top of that, they're adopting more of a sedentary lifestyle.
Interesting.
Okay, because they're doing more computer-based work, service type work, so less of the manual work that they, factory work, agricultural work that they used to do.
Yeah. Even just walking. Like,
Yeah, so India has the highest number of new onset diabetes, and then followed now by China,
wow.
and United States is actually third. Yeah, so that's interesting. Is that as countries become more industrialized,
They're moving less.
well, they're moving less. They have more money to buy more calories,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of those calories are coming from uh, calories that are from fast food, candy,
Yep.
more industrialized type of calories.
Yeah.
Rather than spending that into gaining more whole food.
I feel like technology has a huge impact on that too, because it's just making everything easier to access. Even with this whole remote teaching that we're doing,
Yeah.
it's not going well at all, but some people are like, oh, it's so great working from home. And
Right.
I can't wait to get back into work and actually be on my feet and have an interaction. So
Yeah.
it's scary that we're doing this now, and that some companies might see that it's actually working and saving money for them and make people even less active because of it.
Right. Yeah, because you don't have to move around.
Yeah.
Every day you just sit in front of the computer, and that's what I do now. I do telemedicine.
Yeah.
Telemedicine is basically just talking to a computer all day.
Yeah. Talking to a screen.
Yeah. Although I have to say, a lot of patients, say that nowadays modern medicine is really talking to a screen.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Because you go into a doctor's office, and the doctors come in, they have their laptop, and then you're talking to them, and the doctor's like this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
So it's actually in that sense it actually made that big of a difference. Yeah, and the article you sent me yesterday too was very very interesting.
Yeah,
about
yeah.
how people are actually getting more sedentary, and during this pandemic crisis,
Yeah.
and that it's going to take a lot more time for them to get back, into shape.
Yeah, because I'm sure anyone who got into an exercise routine for a while and just stopped, you realize it's really, really hard to get yourself back into that routine again. And with that happening, it's going to make a lot more sedentary Americans,
Right.
because they're going to be facing that, that wall to get over.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is so unfair.
Yeah, really.
It's so easy to get out of shape. It's so easy to gain weight. But
To
it's
do the opposite, it's so hard.
but it's so damn hard to start exercising or eating well. That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the most important thing with this, and I think your sister touched on it too when you had that interview with her, is that everything had to be individualized.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
One thing I thought that was very interesting that she said was, her nutritionist actually told her that she wasn't eating enough,
Yeah, yeah.
and yet
Especially protein. She was
Right.
saying she lacked on.
right, but yet once she started eating more protein, even though she's eating more calories, she's actually started losing weight.
Yeah, so she used to intermittent fast,
Right.
but she just said because she wasn't hungry in the morning. So she did it inadvertently, and then she said when she started eating breakfast again, she actually lost some weight.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so that's interesting. Again, that goes back to a concept as a calorie is not always equal calorie,
Yeah.
and it depends on what your body needs.
yeah, everything's individual.
Because let's say if you're a very active person, you're an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you exercise, 8 hours a day, okay, or you train 8 hours a day. Well, if you don't have enough calories in your system, okay, then your body.
your performance goes down.
Right,
Yeah.
because then it becomes a stress on your body, and then once something becomes a stress on your body, then you start inducing more inflammation. You start inducing more, your metabolism changes.
Start breaking down muscle.
Right,
Yeah.
break down muscles. Then you go into this preservation phase where your body tries to hold on to everything to
So you get a
prevent further breakdown.
Start getting a little pot belly.
Right.
Yeah.
So like what we talked about, intermittent fasting may not be the best thing for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, I think for the general American public, if everybody can do intermittent fasting, that's great.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to eat 3 meals a day.
Yep.
You don't need to eat 16 hours a day.
Yeah. Well, I even told you when I first did it, 11 years ago.
Right.
That's when I first started CrossFit, so I was like all serious about it, and wanted to compete and whatnot, and my performance was suffering because of it. Now I don't care about my performance, and I just go slower, but I do feel better. I think clear. You and I were speaking,
Right.
like we get fuller quicker, so we're not
Right.
like stuffing our faces, and So you got to think about your lifestyle too. If you're doing something that, if you are a professional athlete, that you're moving a lot, it may not be the best thing. You can still try it, but you got to
Right, but
just learn to listen to the body.
yeah, but when you were CrossFitting, you were burning a lot more calories. You need more proteins and fat for your body to utilize.
Yeah, and also I was also working out like 2-3 times a day, which is stupid.
Right, but the key is that you needed more calories.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you were fasting during that period of time, it may not be the best thing for you to do.
No, exactly.
Okay, it's but again, is like for the general public, is if your job is more sedentary, you're not moving around as much, you're not exercise 2-3 times a day. Okay, well, in that case, cutting down on the number of hours you eat may actually be beneficial. Or
I agree.
or switching to a lower carbohydrate diet may be beneficial.
Or
Okay,
both. You could do both.
or both.
Yeah.
You can do both. You'll be miserable, but you can do both.
I was miserable for a week, but then after the week, I got over that hump, and I'm feeling pretty good now.
Yeah. I mean, I actually have patients who do both.
Yeah.
They do an intermittent fasting regimen plus a ketogenic diet, and they lose a tremendous amount of weight.
Yeah.
And I think it takes time for your body to get adjusted before then becomes the new norm.
Yeah. And you could actually eat a really good diet of like good tasting food on a ketogenic diet too. So, once you discover these foods, it kind of makes giving up, sweet, sugary carbohydrates a little bit easier.
Right. Yeah, because there are a lot of food products, and I said if you start eating whole foods, if you start eating more naturally, is that you start tasting nuances in food that you otherwise won't, because your senses are now more in tune with what you're eating, instead of being overwhelmed with a lot of artificial flavoring a lot of times.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was telling you, there's this book I have to read. Maybe we'll bring it up in a future episode. It's called The Dorito Effect.
Yeah, so what's it about? I just love the name. I'm going to read it just for the name.
Yeah, Dorito Effect. It's about how the food industry.
You love Doritos, by the way.
Yeah, I love Doritos. That's why we don't buy them. but Dorito Effect is well, basically it's about the food industry changing, adding artificial flavoring to food to make these food items more addictive.
Even artificial coloring too. That's a big thing too.
Right. And I think one of the things that one of the things of why I stopped eating or stopped eating as much Doritos is I actually read the label. And one of the one of the ingredients in there is MSG.
Yeah.
You're like, why do you need MSG in chips? But
my whole theory was if you're reading the ingredients and you can't pronounce anything, probably you shouldn't be eating.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. And I was talking to Dr. Luna, and she was saying that if you read the ingredients and there's more than 4 ingredients on there, you just put it back on the shelf because it's probably not good for you.
Yep.
But it tastes so good.
You got to make those the zucchini Doritos I sent you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I think in the end is this is why it's important to, if you're making any type of lifestyle changes, this is why it's good to seek professional opinions.
Yeah.
Or consultations. Seeing a nutritionist. Talking to your trainer.
Mm-hmm.
Because one, you have to determine what your activity level is. Okay, you have to determine what is the optimal amount of calories you would need to ingest for the type of lifestyle.
Exactly. It's all about lifestyle. It's really what it comes down to.
Right. And the other thing too is you have to know, okay, let's say even if they decide you need a 1,600 calorie diet, well, again, you want to fill these 1,600 calories with something that is beneficial for your body
and nutritious, not just simple empty calories.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of eating 1,600 calories of candy bars, okay, you're getting your vegetables, your fruits, your proteins, your good unsaturated fat in there. So this is why it's important to consult with somebody to help you balance these things out.
Yep.
Okay. And it's really changing the concept. Okay. I think here in the United States is that we get caught up in this concept that a lot of people are eating to lose weight. or eating to diet. They
Well,
have an end goal.
we even spoke about that word diet should just be eliminated from our vocabulary
Right.
because it's
Right. So
diet's meant to be temporary and
so
this is a lifestyle
right.
change.
So when you change your eating behavior, your eating style, it's really you're eating for health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're eating to be metabolically healthy, to reduce that inflammation in your system. And then once you achieve that, once your body's starting to get the nutrients it needs, it's getting the number of calories it needs, and you're starting to reduce the inflammation in your system, well, that's when the weight comes down.
Yep.
Okay, that's when your insulin resistance decreases. So you decrease your overall body amount of insulin. Okay, and that by itself is going to reduce that storage of energy into fat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And even like too, with the big things these people start eating this way is they drop a ton of weight very quickly because of all the water weight that they had that
Right.
their body was just
Right,
holding
right.
on to.
Especially
with the inflammation.
especially ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
A lot of the initial weight loss from a ketogenic diet is you're losing a lot of that water weight.
Yep.
Um, but that's the thing is, lifestyle is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Lifestyle is 90% of your chronic disease control,
Yep.
if not more.
Yeah.
And I try to sort of ingrain this into people, but as a society, we like quick fixes.
Oh yeah.
Okay, the
Americans are very impatient.
right. This is why pharmaceutical companies do well because they
Yeah.
come up with a pill.
Quick fixes. Yep.
That fix these things. Is nobody ever wants to wait 6 to 8 weeks to start losing weight.
Mm-hmm.
They want to lose weight yesterday.
Yeah.
So they'll rather take a pill that suppress their appetite so they can eat a 500 calorie diet to
And probably
rapidly
feel
lose
awful
weight.
and have no energy.
Right, and they feel terrible.
And you can't sustain that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and then same thing with diabetes. Is sometimes I get accused of peddling medicine. I've had patients who come in and said I'm just prescribing these medication because I'm getting a kickback. Well, first of all, I don't think any doctor is getting kickback nowadays from
Yeah.
from medication. Secondly, is well, you know what? If you're not willing to change your lifestyle, I have to give you the medication that your body needs to support your current lifestyle.
Exactly.
Okay, so
That's a very good point.
Right. So if you're if you have type 2 diabetes and you're eating too much carbohydrates, and your blood sugar is 300-400 all the time, well, guess what? I have to give you insulin to replace that insulin your body's not making.
Yeah.
To be able to process all those carbohydrates that you're eating.
Which technically isn't that kind of counterintuitive too? Because if that's going to be making them gain more weight, though, right?
Well, it is. It is.
Unfortunately, but that's also making them not die.
Right, but it's one thing is what's more important:
Yeah.
treating the disease and the consequences of disease,
Yeah.
or to start making somebody more,
Less likely to die.
less likely to die.
Yeah.
It's it's a tough choice, and
Yeah.
I always tell my patients that
Yeah.
is I always tell them that think of it on a scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so on one side you have medications, on the other side you have lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well it's a balance.
Yeah.
Okay, if you put more into lifestyle, well, the less medications you have to take. Okay, the same thing. The less you put into lifestyle, well, the more medications
Yeah.
you're going to have to take.
You can even go with even with exercising. Like I have people come to me all the time. They're like, "Oh, I want to lose like 10 extra pounds. Could you like write me an exercise program?" I'm just like, "What's your diet like?" Because it's not about exercise. I mean, you could exercise, all you want, but if you're eating the wrong foods, you're not going to see the results you need. So
Right.
I would say
it's
it's probably like 80% exercise, 20% diet.
right, and I was
I mean, opposite. I'm sorry, 80% diet, 20% exercise. I said it the opposite.
80%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because after a certain age, exercise, you don't lose weight with exercise because you can't burn
Yeah.
enough.
It's just kind of about maintaining.
It's still important because you still maintain lean body mass
Yeah,
with
yeah.
exercise, but you're not going to burn enough calories to actually start losing weight.
It's also just great for your heart as well.
and
Yeah.
and So I tell people after the age of 30, you can exercise all you want, but if you don't change the way you eat,
Yeah.
you're
You're
not
see
going to
anything.
lose weight. And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
You know,
It's hard to change people's lifestyle.
Right,
It's how
right.
much they want it.
Right. It's tough because you want to eat, you want to enjoy life, but then you have to enjoy it responsibly.
Yeah. And even all the stuff that we're saying, if people do make this change, you could still have your cheat days, Just
Right.
don't make them cheat weeks.
Well, it's like having a martini.
Yeah.
You have your martini, but you have
We're
it
not
responsibly.
We're not drinking 30 beers like we did in college.
Surprised I didn't lose my liver back then. Yeah, so I think, so this is something I think we're going to revisit again and again down the line. Something we'll discuss again once there's more literature out about, some of the additional benefits of it.
Especially because both you and I are doing it. So
right, and there are ongoing studies looking at using ketogenic diet in the treatment of cancer or cancer prevention.
I read that, yeah. Or they actually responded better to chemotherapy, the ones who,
right,
yeah.
Yeah, same thing with intermittent fasting and restrictive time eating, is that they're also starting to look at this and saying, well, can it prevent cancer?
Yeah.
Okay, because you're now decreasing inflammation and you're increasing cell resilience,
Which all signs point to yes, it can.
So in animal models, it looks promising. In animal models, is that if you fast a rat, they grow less tumors. Okay, but again, it's translating from rat to humans are very different. So that'll be interesting to see, is do we see the same trend when we bring this to humans too?
I assume we will.
Oh, I guess we're not that different from rats.
We're optimistics, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the DNA sequence, it's actually not that big of a difference.
Pretty close, right? Yeah. I mean, we kind of look like them, so it makes sense.
So hopefully this is an interesting, exciting field. It'll continue to change over time. I guess as it changes, we'll keep reading, we'll keep updating,
and we'll keep doing.
Hopefully that means that over time we will start looking better.
Yeah.
And
maybe I'll lose some of my gray hairs.
Yeah. 30 years from now, we're still gonna look like the way we do now.
Yeah. We're like Wolverine.
All right. But it's always fun. Again,
this was great.
Totally excited about this.
Way more fun. Less awkward talking to a screen.
Way more fun than talking on Skype.
Yep.
A lot less freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you do freeze, it's on purpose. Yeah. So I'm hoping to bring more of this and get nice days like this. I guess we can continue to keep doing our socially distanced outside recordings.
Yep, and hopefully it won't be that much longer.
Yep. All right.
All right.
Take care. Cheers.
Have a good one, everyone. Stay safe.
Yep. Stay safe. Cheers.